Hi guys, what is up? Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to another video in my little wedding series that I'm doing leading up to the wedding. I want to take you guys along on all of like the wedding planning things that I'm doing because I am doing like the majority of the planning myself. So that's why I wanted to do this little wedding series. The first video in this series was me shopping for a venue. Today I wanted to sit down and talk about the first things to do in the wedding planning process. I think when you first get engaged, it can be really overwhelming. You're like, where do I start? What do I do here? So I thought this video could be good to have if you are freshly engaged and you're about to jump into the wedding planning process. I did debate waiting and doing this video after the wedding, but instead afterwards I will do like a things I wish I knew type video, but I wanted to do this video now because I'm in the midst of everything and I feel like my knowledge is like at its max and I don't want to forget anything because I've been doing so much research so far to get planning started for my 2025 wedding. So if you are new here, I'll do a quick intro so that you can be all caught up. My name's Krista, I'm 25, I live in Tampa, Florida, and I got engaged in April of 2023. We spent like the first 6 months or so of our engagement just relaxing. We didn't even really look at anything regarding wedding planning. And then just now at the beginning of 2024, I have like started the wedding planning process for a late spring, early summer 2025 wedding. So I'm allowing myself a little bit over a year to plan the wedding. All in, by the time the wedding comes around, we will have had a little bit over a 2-year engagement. So I feel like that's maybe, from what I've seen at least, a little bit longer than normal. I feel like a lot of people do like a 1 year to 1.5 year engagement, but I wanted to allow myself plenty of time for a few reasons. One, when we got engaged, I wasn't ready to jump right into wedding planning. We were moving, there was just a lot going on, so I just wanted to chill for a little bit, and the thought of starting wedding planning really stressed me out. So that's kind of why I put it off. And then also, the longer you allow yourself, the more time, like depending on your financial situation, you have to save up money. So that's kind of why I wanted to do a decently long 2-year engagement. And I will say, before we get into any of the actual things you need to start doing for your wedding, like enjoy your engagement for a little bit. There is no timeline, everyone's different. I know people who have been engaged for 2 years that literally haven't even started planning their wedding. Whereas I know people who get engaged and then a week later they're looking at venues. But to me, I think you should give yourself like a couple months at least to just relax a little bit, like enjoy being engaged. You don't need to jump right into the stresses of wedding planning. Just relax, decide, are you gonna have an engagement party? Maybe plan that and just relax a little bit before jumping into all of the wedding festivities. I am planning to share a lot throughout the wedding planning process and especially towards the end, so make sure if you're not subscribed that you subscribe and stick around. I have like a budget that I'm gonna go over and share with you guys more towards the end of wedding planning. I have so much documentation. I have like timelines. In fact, I will go ahead and share at least the timeline down below for you guys. Like it's a planning timeline, so what you should be doing each month out from your wedding. I plan to give you guys lots of free planning, budgeting, ideas, all this stuff. I plan to share everything because that's what I love to do on this channel. So make sure you're subscribed so you can get all of that good stuff. But I will have the planning timeline linked down below if you want to check that out. It'll be in Google Sheets, so it'll be customizable. If you want to make a copy of it, you can edit it for yourself. I do want to do a very quick disclaimer before we get into the steps that I did. All of this stuff really is my opinion and what I wanted for my wedding. Everyone's going to be different, and at the end of the day, it's really not about the wedding, right? It's about the person that you're getting married to and the fact that you are dedicating to spend the rest of your life with each other. Like, marriage is no joke. It's a serious decision. I think people get caught up in like the performance aspect of it and making their wedding like a show, but at the end of the day, that's not what it's about, right? It's about the marriage and the two people coming together And so let's just not forget that when going through all of this. It's really not about the wedding itself. But with that being said, it can be kind of fun to plan your wedding. So let's go ahead and jump into the first things you need to do when it comes to wedding planning. The very first thing you need to do is figure out your financial situation and set a tentative budget. And I say tentative because it's going to change. I feel like it's very unlikely that you set a budget and idea and that's exactly what stays with. Like I set a certain floral budget and now I've decided I'm probably not even going to use that budget very much. And then, you know, same with the opposite. I set a certain budget for our venue and I ended up going over that. It's not going to be exact, but it's a good way to get an idea of what you can and cannot include. Get an idea of what you think you want to spend. I will say the average wedding in the United States is $30,000. So that's like your average. From the research I've done, that's going to be your pretty basic wedding with maybe 100 guests, doing like a small venue and then a reception. It's about $30,000 for like the basic wedding. So that's kind of what I set mine off of. I was like, all right, if 30,000 is the minimum for a basic wedding, what do I want that's above the norm? What do I want that's below the norm? And that's kind of how I set my budget. That just gives you an idea of also what vendors you can reach out to. So what photographers can I afford? What venues can I afford? That way you're not reaching out and touring places that are out of your budget. So first thing you need to do is just get your financial plan in order. Also, who's paying for the wedding? You do need to have those conversations with family and with your partner because you can't really set a budget without knowing where that money is coming from. Second thing, kind of in a similar realm, is you need to set a tentative guest list. Again, that's definitely going to change, but it's really just so you can know how many people you are planning to have at your wedding. So you just need a guest count for a couple reasons. One, again, this tells you what kind of venues you should be touring. If you're gonna have 300 people at your wedding, you gotta make sure that your venue can hold that many people. Or if you're only having 50 people, you probably don't want to tour these huge venues. Guest list also is a big part of your budget because vendors like the caterer charge you per person. Same with your bar, they charge you per person. So it's a good way to know about how much your catering bill might be. The average cost for catering is $75 per person. I know our bar, for example, charged us, we're doing an open bar, so it charged us $32 per person per hour. So knowing how many people you're gonna have at your wedding is really important for your budget and also to know what kind of venues you're gonna tour. The next step, and I would argue the most important step of everything, is to tour and book your venue. The reason I say I think you should do this first before booking a planner or a photographer or anything is because a lot of venues have really specific requirements. For example, one of the venues that I toured had a list of vendors and we could only work with the vendors on their list. So they gave me an approved list of vendors. Those were the vendors we were going to be able to choose from. And on that vendor list included like a wedding planner. So a lot of venues can be strict with who they want to work with because they obviously want everything to go smoothly. They want to work with people they trust. So a lot of them have a required list of vendors. So before you can really move forward with all your other vendors, you're going to want to have your venue set. A lot of them also have certain requirements. So the venue we have, for example, does require you to have a planner, at least a partial planner. And then once you have your venue, it feels like everything else in a way starts to fall into place. That's why the venue is so important. Like I said, they send you a list of required vendors, and if they don't have a required list, they probably have a list of ones that they like at least. And that right there cuts down a lot of your research on how you're gonna find vendors because you can use the list that they sent you. It also gives you a good idea of what your wedding day is gonna look like. You can go to their Instagram, their portfolios, and see what past weddings there look like. So you can really start to get the idea for what you want for your wedding. I feel like your venue just shapes what your wedding day is going to look like. With that being said, booking the venue for me was the hardest decision thus far for everything that I have done because it does set your entire day and it sets your vibe. I felt the most stress I have felt with wedding planning picking the venue. It really hasn't been that bad besides that, because going into it, you also are deciding what kind of wedding you want. Do we want a big wedding with a big venue? Do we just want to elope at the courthouse? So these are all those beginning decisions that you're having to make. and they all fall on your venue. And then like I said, once you have the venue, it's like, okay, you know what vibe you're going for. You have a list of vendors to choose from, and then you can just go from there. So when you are touring venues, just a few questions that you're definitely gonna want to know. First thing, their availability. Venues book out crazy, crazy fast. I was touring venues in November of 2023 that were already booked out for spring of 2025. Which is insane. Unfortunately, the venues that I was looking at, they had like 3 dates left for 2025. And so you don't necessarily get to choose your wedding date. You kind of just have to go with what their availability is. So I think it's important to know what they still have available when you're touring. What's their deposit schedule like? A lot of them split them into 3 payments. So you'll do like a deposit and then they'll have like a 60-day due and then like a 30-day due. You're gonna wanna make sure they have areas for both the bride and groom to get ready. You're gonna wanna know their cancellation policy, which is something that I never really considered until the age of COVID. So what kind of policy do they have with that? Are you gonna lose your deposit? Do they let you move the date? What's going on with that? What is their weather plan? Super important. Do they have a tent that you can use if it's gonna rain, if you're planning to do like an outdoor ceremony? There's gonna be a cost of your venue, and then there's usually a food and beverage minimum. So make sure you know what all the costs are. Make sure you know if there are any additional fees. For example, our venue doesn't allow outside alcohol, so they provide the alcohol. And they told me the price of the alcohol, but then when I got the quote, I also saw they were charging for bartenders, which makes sense, but I just didn't think of that. So there can be these kind of hidden charges that you might not realize are gonna be there. If you're touring a venue that is a wedding venue and that's how they advertise themselves, a lot of time they do already have these things, but you do just wanna make sure that they have tables, chairs. Do they have linens that you can use? Because if not, you have to rent those, and that's a whole nother like expense that you have to add on. Do they have any decorations you can rent? A lot of places will have like arches or different things like that. What is their parking situation for guests? And then just any other questions that are specific to you and your wedding. I definitely suggest going with a list of questions. I had a list on my phone. Some people want to have the rehearsal dinner at their venue. These are just things that you should think of before and make a list of questions when going to your venue tours. And I will say all of this, I would say you can be doing between like a year to a year and a half out. I think that's like a good time to start looking at venues and getting an idea of your wedding, maybe the year and a half mark. And then at the year mark is when, in my opinion, you need to start getting things booked. So put that deposit down on your venue and then get into your other vendors. So after the venue, next thing I think you should get out of the way is a wedding planner. Does your venue require you to have one? Like I said, most of them do require at least a day of planner or a partial planner. So decide on what level of planning you want. Do you want a full wedding planner, partial, just a day of? I went with a 3-month partial planner. So at the 3-month mark before our wedding, she takes over everything. All communication with the vendors, also does like setup and takedown at the venue. So there's just so many different options. So look into different services and what you think will be best for you based on your budget and your desires. Okay, my camera just died, of course. So I switched cameras if the lighting or anything looks different. But like I was saying, I found all my vendors through my wedding venue, not just the list they sent me, but also looking at their Instagrams and seeing real life people who have worked at the venue on weddings, real life weddings. So that's how I found my wedding planner. So after the venue, I went ahead with the wedding planner because you can also use their resources and their list of preferred vendors to keep booking everything out. So at this point, like I said, we're around like the year out mark to be booking these things. Next up, you're gonna think of what's your priority. So for me, photo and video were high priorities. I think they are for a lot of people. Pretty much everything at your wedding, you don't really get to keep any of it. You don't get to keep the florals, you don't get to keep any of the decorations or the food, but all you will have from it are the photos and the videos to keep those memories alive, because I've heard you tend to like black out and barely remember the day, and it goes by so fast and it's such a whirlwind. So photo and video were so important to me. So I wanted to go ahead and get those booked. Again, I found the photographer through my venue's Instagram. They posted some of her photos. I loved her work. Went ahead and got her booked. My videographer is actually an old friend of mine who has a wedding videography business, and she reached out to me, and I was like, that's literally the most perfect situation because I trust her. She's super creative and I love all her work she's ever done. So I'll be working with her for video. And then other important vendors that also tend to book about a year out are gonna be your caterer and your music. So I went ahead and booked our caterer. I just went with one that the venue suggested that they had worked with. I've heard of this caterer before. They have a good reputation. So I went ahead and went with them. And then for the DJ, again, I found the DJ through, it wasn't even my venue's Instagram. It was a different venue's Instagram. But again, they just had a really good reputation. Something to look for in vendors is their response time to emails. To me, that's really important. I don't want to work with people who have bad communication. Right, so I was between two DJs. One DJ I wanted because he had a really good package for a really good price that included a lot of cool things like a photo booth, for example. He was horrible at responding to my emails. I tried to set up a call with him one day and he just completely ghosted me. So at that point I was like, okay, you're not worth it just because you're a little bit cheaper. Planning a wedding is enough on its own to have to worry about your vendors responding to you. So I went with a guy with a much better reputation, a little more pricey, but that's worth it for peace of mind and knowing you're gonna have a good DJ, someone who's responsible. That's something else to decide. Do you want like live music or do you want a DJ? I think DJs tend to be a little bit more affordable. Don't quote me on that because I didn't look at live music. For me, I knew I wanted a DJ just because I like the actual songs. So that is what we wanted, but I think live music can also be really cool, so you gotta decide what you want to do there. During this time that you're looking at all of your major vendors and getting those booked, something else you can be doing in the meantime is thinking of who you want in your bridal party, if you want a bridal party, and asking them to be part of your wedding. I think that's a really exciting thing as well. I actually haven't done my bridesmaids proposals yet. It's another thing I think around a year out, a little over a year out, you can do. Start thinking of who you want by your side on your wedding day and planning a little something special for them. It doesn't have to be anything big. You could send them a bouquet of flowers asking for them to be your bridesmaid. You could just ask them. I don't think it has to be this big show. Or you can do the really cute like little baskets with all the little treats and stuff in them for your girls or your guys. But you definitely want to let these people know at a decent amount ahead of time that you would love for them to be part of your day so that they can get their own finances in order, make sure they know that they are going to be a part of your day. To me, that is like all the big stuff. Once you have all of that stuff out of the way, you're having a wedding. Congratulations, it's done. All those are booked. You're having a wedding. You could not do anything else and you could still have your wedding. Obviously, there's quite a few more things that you need to get done, but these are like the biggest 1 year out things that you need to check off your to-do list. And then you can do things that are a little bit more fun. You can look at your smaller vendors. Like for me, that's florals. You do want to go ahead and get them reserved, but you don't actually have to make decisions on florals until much closer to your wedding. The florist I was gonna work with said final decisions aren't due until 2 months before the wedding. Just because you have them reserved, you still have time to think about what you want when it comes to your vendors. To me, getting the big vendors booked was just like a weight off my shoulders. Like I said, it's like, all right, we're having a wedding. There's no going back now. Everything else is just the icing, the cherry on top that we get done. So you can go do a little bit of the more fun stuff now. They say you should look at wedding dresses 8 to 12 months before your wedding, which is super fun and exciting, so you can start doing that. You can also go take some engagement photos if you want. Let your maid of honor know what you want to do for your bachelorette. Let her start planning that. Just some more of the fun stuff, I feel like, is this limbo period of 8 to 12 months before the wedding. It's kind of like, okay, we're just doing a little bit more fun stuff before crunch time comes, which I feel like is like 6 months out. That's when you really got to start making decisions and getting your stuff together. So like 12 months out, you're making big decisions, booking your vendors. Then you have a little bit of a limbo period, and then 6 months out, you gotta get back to work. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful. Like I said, I will have a timeline down below of what to do from a year out all the way down to the day of your wedding. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already so that you can follow along on all the wedding planning fun. And with that being said, I will see you guys so very soon in my next video.